magical thing.
Grows where you are, it exists where you are.
An intentional journey to open up the pathways
To connect us to something bigger. It helps everybody in the equation.
has been the magic of the people, and it's passed from person to person.
You have to follow through. You have to do the thing. Like happy, safe place.
Is that your logic, or was that something you were told?
Focus on your craft and your practice. Just ask me why. Why in general?
Can you unteach yourself something that society has taught you?
Mystical experiences will always be different.
Your body is your temple.
You've probably been doing certain things your whole life.
You need nothing else other than what you're in right now.
This is Georgina. This is Nike.
And this is Temperance.
And welcome to Occultism with a Side of Salt. Hello, this is Georgina.
This is Temperance.
And welcome to Occultism with a Side of Salt. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that isn't talked a ton about in the occult community, but is pretty relevant, and that would be occult academia. So over the past... Elitism. In this episode, we're going to be talking about something that's come into the sphere in the past couple decades, and that would be occult academia and its relationship to elitism, and our relationship to academics, PhDs, certificates, classes in the occult community. We're going to be talking about what occult academia is, the problems with it, how it leads to elitism and classism, how people pretend to be academics in the occult community, the problem with certificates in relationship to things like tarot and various certificate programs, what good and bad occult classes look like, if classes are necessary, and kind of that whole realm of topics. Let's break into it.
I want to bring up something, I'm just going to jump us into it and go off outline. I want to bring up something that Thorn Mooney recently posted about in relationship to academia, right? Because when we talk and we read books and there's so much discourse online that, things need to be cited. There needs to be some big bibliography. There needs to be this, and we make it so boring, black and white from a library. I love books and I love libraries, but something that she brought up that I really want to start first is that not everything in occultism, in witchcraft, in mysticism can be or should be cited. There should be some UPG. And so I think that having the stance of everything needs to be primary source cited, etc., really actually detracts from our overall discourse. And I do tend to agree with Thorne in that, because if we don't have anyone creating new ideas and new concepts and introducing new things, then we won't grow as a community. Now, I'm not saying that these things should be taken over and placed as more than or better than or replacing the old ideas. I don't think the old ideas are bad, but I do think there is room to grow in new ideas, and those new ideas can be 100% new, and there's not going to be 100-year, 300-year, whatever, however many year record to make it valid. Its validity is in that was the experience of the practitioner who wrote the piece about it.
I actually completely agree. I think a problem in a lot of current occult literature and current occult spaces, and I'm extremely guilty of doing this, especially in my Occult 101 series on YouTube. And someone brought it up, I don't remember who, but a lot of occult books have just become a synthesis. What they are is they take a bunch of older ideas and they just explain them to you. And they don't add any new perspectives, new angles, or new developments. Because in a way, so I think sources are important, right? I think that we need to explain where we got things. And if it's something we came up with, we should be honest about that. But I think this rise of books being synthesis is it's interesting, right? Because the tradition of occult literature back before sort of the rise of occult publishers and really occultism becoming what it is now, was a lot of these books were very much new ideas. They were very much new takes, new perspectives. And these very famous occult books are almost entirely that, right? Like if we look at Picatrix, we look at Agrippa, we look at Solomon. These books, of course, they had inspirations, they had teachers that they learned from, but they were largely new takes. And I think currently a lot of our literature is just repackaged old ideas written in a more accessible language. And I don't think that's bad. I think there's a really big place for that, right? Weiser released a concise guide to Aleister Crowley, which was amazing, right? And it was just literally a synthesis of his ideas and giving an introduction to his work, so people could jump in with some perspective. But I think that this obsession with citing, with having basis, with having age, as if age is sort of the barrier of knowledge, which we did address in our modernity versus tradition episode. I think we do kind of detract from new ideas. I think a lot of the books that have come out in the occult community in the past bit of time have just been synthesis and a lot of just rehashing old things. And I think, in a way, while we are trying to stop LARPers, we're trying to stop people passing off their UPG as knowledge, we are sort of stamping the growth of occultism and kind of avoiding these new ideas from taking form.
Well, a lot of this seems to be related to, like, our issue right now with a lot of people just writing beginner books over and over and over again. And so a lot of the new content that's coming out is just how to start, but there's nothing deeper really coming out in a lot of spaces. There's a lot of talk about the algorithm books, which we've spoken on before here and there. I think it's just sort of like a general issue of like synthesis and going over beginner content over and over again and making things that are easily digestible and marketable for the people who are just starting. Like, I think part of why we're having this issue is because it comes down to a marketing thing, like the capitalist inclination to do things that are easily consumable, because there's not as much of a market, or at least they don't think there's as much of a market for the deeper stuff. But, you know, there's always that new wave every year around Halloween of newer witches. I really think that it has to do with that problem that we have with the marketing towards absolute beginners versus trying to actually have something interesting and new developing.
No, I mean, I agree. I think that people in the occult community are a big thing that I've noticed, right, over the years, and talking to other people, is to have credibility as a practitioner and to teach classes and to be a sort of voice in the community, you need to have a book. And someone having released a book denotes them being like a verified practitioner in a way. And it seems like this releasing a book is almost like a status thing in the occult community. Once someone has a book out, they suddenly have this new level of credibility that they didn't have before. And I think because of that, people are pushing themselves to write books before they're ready, because they think that will give them that level of legitimacy, that because now, like, we're kind of moving away from organized occultism. People are largely moving away from orders, moving away from covens, that those systems are kind of decreasing in popularity. Obviously, they're still kicking and they're still lovely, but they are kind of, falling out of fashion. And I think now that level of status does come from a book. And I think people are kind of writing books before they're ready. And because of that, their books are just synthesis.
Oh, I think there's a place for synthesis, but when we look at the overall genre, what is necessary, what is needed, what is missing, right? We have to take into account what the market wants and what publishers are willing to publish. And if a publisher isn't, let's say you pitch the best 201 book possible and you send it to 3 or 4 publishers, but if those publishers know 201 books aren't selling, 101 books are selling, it's a good chance your book might not get published. You're going to have to step out of your bounds and publish it yourself. And it's a deeper conversation than just like, oh, the market is flooded with beginner books. Well, the market's flooded with beginner books because people want beginner books. People are buying beginner books. Not everyone is advanced and not everyone is intermediate. Not everyone has a solid footing. A lot of people are seeking, especially with the rise of interest in spirituality and occultism due to COVID. I mean, it started a little bit prior to COVID, and we've talked about this before, but it really picked up as people were stuck indoors. They were really interested in reading self-help and spirituality material. And so here we are with a bunch of people who may not know anything about it, searching for what does work for them and what doesn't work for them. So I don't think it's a full problem of like the synthesis aspect, but more of the quality of that. And then also allowing UPG, right? We need to allow authors to write their UPG. We need to allow authors to share their tradition and their experiences, because like, think about it, right? Like, let's go back. Spiral Dance. What basis did Spiral Dance have when it was written? I mean, it had some, but a lot of that book is UPG, and that's what people love about that book, was that it was her experience.
Yeah, well, no book is going to go down in occult history and be revolutionary and start a new movement if it doesn't have UPG, right? Because all of spirituality began with UPG at a certain point, right? The term UPG and verified gnosis are really funny because what verifies gnosis? People doing rituals and time. But in the end, it's all UPG. All this stuff started with one person doing a ritual. And so deviation is fine. It's just, I think people don't realize that the issue is just when you have UPG and act like it's some ancient sacred tradition, like a lot of occultists in the early 1900s really like to do. Because it was a big thing back then. People would be like, yeah, the ascended masters gave this to me, the ancient sages did this, and they would kind of make up a sort of pseudo history. But I think now people are much more, and ever since like the 60s, 70s onwards, I feel like people have been a lot more honest about that stuff. And I think because there's been this reactionary sort of boom against, I don't like that Wicca lied about being an ancient religion. I don't like that some traditional witchcraft groups have lied about being more ancient than they are. I don't like that all these things are more modern than I think they are, because inherently we do kind of have a bias that age equals better. That's just a human bias, I think. People have pushed against UPG. They've been like, it's weird, right? Because obviously in our own practice we have UPG. If there's no UPG in someone's practice, it's just kind of repetition. And I think because we're so kind of, people are so frustrated with this whole, this is an ancient religion when it isn't type narrative, there's been that pushback against UPG. And that's where I think it really comes from.
Well, I think that when we get into that pushback, right, we actually do tend to breach the field of, I don't want to use the word LARPing, but it's the word that we've written down in our outline, so I'm going to use the word LARPing.
We've discussed
LARPing. When you say, okay, I'm part of this super ancient order and tradition that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we do X, Y, Z, and all of our spells are cast with emojis now because we're in the 21st century. Okay, like there's some things going on there that are, LARPing does play a very big role in this, because there's two camps, I think, in my opinion, that people can like easily fall into. It's like a slippery slope off of the beaten path. These are like extreme paths. Is that you get the ceremonial armchair, almost pretentious bros who are like, oh, if it's not, they speak weird too. I don't know how to describe it.
No, I can do it. This is my impersonation. Hello, I am Fratter35231X1, and today we will be doing Liber A321 Samek Resh, and I'm going to quote Crowley repetitively, and you need to do these rituals perfectly and never deviate. But I actually, I don't do rituals regularly. I just read books and memorize them. I just memorize Liber 777. That's what I do in my free time. I memorize Kabbalistic correspondences and never utilize them. I just memorize them. And I am better than you because I read books. No, I don't practice, but I do own some books. So this has been Fratter 35X13 Samek. My magical motto is, I'm trying to do, I don't know any Latin, but a sentence in Latin. It's like that type of stuff.
No,
and then
Patris, whatever that one is.
Nomine et Patris Matrix in Helia.
There you go.
And they always use of OV.
So we have that camp. And I'm not saying that they're LARPers, okay? But like, there's a certain quality of them that is non-practicing. And then we have the LARPers, like the real LARPers.
Let's give an example. I'll give another example because hello. I have 10 deities in my room right now, and Lucifer told me he's my dad. Hades told me I'm prettier than Persephone. And I'm actually from a lineage of witches who died in Salem, and I found this because my favorite Reiki master told me so.
Ooh.
And I'm also, I think that deep down, I'm actually like a cat. And I found this through oracle cards while doing a vision moment with my patrons, because I work with 93 gods all at once. And I invoked the Goetia in one day. And I don't read books, but I'm better than you because I'm brilliant, and I'm definitely not making this up for clicks. I would never do that. I would never lie.
No, you
Well,
know
see,
what?
no, but those are the people that come out with the. I don't mean to cut you off, Maggie, but those are the people that come out with the books are outdated argument, which is the exact opposite of kind of what our episode is about, which is elitism and witchcraft and occult spaces. But it is relevant to this conversation because that in itself is a form of elitism. I know that sounds weird because they're elite in like an ignorant way, but
Anti-intellectual elitism.
yeah, like, oh, you read books like outdated, you're canceled, you're irrelevant, you're old, you're a boomer, like whatever. Okay, like I'm sorry that your mom let you eat Tide Pods as a kid, but here we are.
My favorite version of the elitism is people who have pretended to read these books, say that they've read these books, say that they know these concepts, and then have to ask basic ass questions about what they are. Like, I've read all of these books, and I've read all the libraries. I read what's your fucking Thelema book? The Book of the Law. I read the Book of the Law every night before bed. But also, do you guys know who Aleister Crowley is? I want to do some research on him.
Yeah, I read occult books. For those not seeing, I have a play stacked inside an occult book.
Yeah,
Is it just
like,
for the
like, I definitely do chaos magic, but also pop paganism is stupid and bullshit and a lie, and how dare you tell me that Pikachu could be part of a pop pagan pantheon. Pop paganism is stupid, but also I do chaos magic. So I'm really advanced, and I've read all these chaos magic books. I've read these books, you probably haven't heard of them, and they're probably too advanced for you. But also, what do you think about pop paganism?
Have you heard of Phil Hine?
Yeah.
He's really obscure.
So, yeah, I think that we have those two camps, but really at the end of the day, we have elitism coming from two extreme polar opposite spectrums. One is super into investing their money into physical items. Stocks, no, those are no. We're not even
It's
getting
book worship. It's book worship.
It's book worship. And then we have like the other end of the spectrum that live and die for TikTok and Discord. But honestly, both of these people are kind of like fuck poor people because neither of those camps allow poor people to properly be in this space. Because you would think that in the books aren't valid camp that you would have a little bit more of accessibility, but in that camp a lot of the time we see people say, call out Dollar Tree, we see them call out free resources, we see them call out things of that nature that would enable or allow poor people to practice witchcraft and magic. Yet in those spaces, in those circles, everything is not touchable. Everything is cultural appropriation. Everything is something that you're not allowed to practice. So I do think that there is a very real big element of people actively pushing out poorer folks from these spaces.
Oh, agreed. Especially, let's talk about the LARPer types, right? The way that they push poor people out is so I think sustainability is great. I think if you have the money to shop ethically, right? But a lot of people don't. And so when you say someone using like this little candle, I got it at a discount store down the road, cancel me, is like wrong. Sure, some people can afford really nice candles from their local occult store, but some people can't. And so it becomes like an attempt to, so it's an attempt to be progressive, which, great. But it comes in a way where it's progressivism that excludes the people who need progress to go in their favor, because the occult community has a classism problem. We did a full episode on it. And I think that, yeah, and obviously on the elitism side, there's very obvious classism. I've seen a take, and this is one of the takes that inspired us to make this episode, that to be an occult author or to talk about occultism on the internet in any sort of teaching capacity, you need a degree in esotericism or theology, which to the people who have degrees in theology, great. That's amazing. Esotericism degrees are only really available from like 1 or 2 colleges. They're kind of hard to get. But these degrees, obviously, that gatekeeps people out because degree programs that talk about religion and theology and esotericism do tend to focus on high magic, largely, right? Because I know there's a degree in Western esotericism at a college in Europe called the University of Amsterdam, and it's almost entirely on the Hermetic, Thelemic, Gnostic, alchemical tradition. And obviously that excludes folk practices. So I'm sure some classes do cover folk practices, but a lot of these folk traditions, and when people are writing about them, you want to be written about from a practitioner. And the people who sort of historically dominate folk traditions are poor people, right? This is the magic of the people for the people. And so when people go and say you need a degree to teach about occultism or to teach about any occult subject, that can sometimes work for ceremonial magic, but even then, ceremonial magic has a big history of being associated with the upper class. So it actually gatekeeps middle class modern ceremonial magicians out. But it really gatekeeps folk practitioners from talking about their practice, because a lot of modern folk practitioners are not academics. They're people who got into folk magic to connect with their roots, like people who practice hoodoo, people who practice witchcraft who got into it, to help with like a rough situation. And you see a lot of folk practitioners from those situations wanting to teach on YouTube, especially like social media, because it's accessible, it's easy, it's a lot more easy to get off social media stuff than write a book. And when you say you need a degree to talk about this stuff and to teach, it really limits who can teach. And when a lot of these traditions that people are teaching have such a historic tie to the working class, it becomes very weird and a very tricky gray zone where it's almost gatekeeping the people the practice are for from teaching about the practice.
We see this a lot with like if you've learned from your parents, do your parents need to be theologists? And a lot of the like traditional stuff you're going to learn from your parents, from your community, like do your parents need to be theologists? Like if you're a Christian, we don't see any of the same stuff. When we go to spirituality, you don't need to be a pastor to read the Bible. You don't need to be a pastor to teach your children Christianity, or at least the very basics. Like you're meant to have some understanding of it on your own. Not everybody's going to become a pastor or whatever. Why do we seem to put this same enforcement onto like us but not them? Like why is it this group but not that group, especially when like Christianity itself is so embedded in a lot of folk practices? Why do you need to be some sort of like legally recognized academic on a topic? I don't really understand it.
Well, also, like, theology programs largely, like, it's a very recent phenomenon that you can get a degree in occultism, and it's at only a very few schools, right? And so a lot of people, when they get a general theology degree, it's a very different experience than, let's say, you are in a community and that community taught you folk magic from being a child up through your adult life, right? Like, those are very different experiences and will produce a different type of knowledge. And I think occult academia, I'm really, really glad that occultism is being discussed more in academia. I think that's great progress. I think that occultism is something that has a beautiful history and interweaves with religious history very beautifully. But I think to say you need a theology degree to talk about occultism is a very unnecessary take. I think people who get these degrees, I have a lot of respect for, and I really respect their voices, and I want them to write books. I want them to have a presence. But I don't think they should own the community and own the ability to create information and books on subjects.
Well, your ability to go to college and to pay for a degree shouldn't denote your place in the community. Like, at the end of the day, I know this is a hot take, but at the end of the day, all a college degree does is prove that you can pay for it and stick through it all the way to the end. Like, it's a very classist take because lots of people are unable to go to the one university in Amsterdam and get their degree in, occultism. Like, it's just not happening. It's a really bad take. And a lot of people are barred out of higher levels of college, right? Like okay, a lot of people could get into, and we're talking from the American perspective, where higher education is not free. So a lot of people in America could probably swing an associate's degree. There's a lot of financial aid and help for an associate's degree. But when you're saying like people need a master's degree or a PhD to speak on these topics, teach on these topics, keynote speaker, whatever they're doing, write books, you're getting into some really dicey territory on class, just in general. These topics are taught person to person. A lot of them, they're taught through personal study, through personal experience. They're not things that you learn them in a book, but you must apply them. You are required to apply these things to gain knowledge and gnosis. So I really don't see the argument for requiring a PhD.
Also, in terms of accessibility, I mean, a lot of people from more working class backgrounds, their parents are a lot more restrictive on the types of degrees they can get. They're really focused on practicality and getting jobs. If you've been on a university campus, you can notice the people who have less material degrees do tend to be of a higher socioeconomic class because they have a back, like a sort of a safety net, right? And I'm speaking generally, right? I'm speaking broadly. But a lot of people from these very working class backgrounds, let's say they want to be an occult academic, their family may not be supportive because they're like, hey, I don't have a way for you to keep living here, get a degree in STEM or nursing or something that's very practical, and is, something that can be easily applied, because to be an occult academic, obviously you can't do that in just an undergraduate. That's, high levels. And so people can see that's not a good return for the amount of money you're putting in, because academics don't get paid a ton. And so for some people, it's just completely inaccessible, and their degree paths are limited by their circumstance. Because a lot of families do sort of put those restrictions on their children and their, people that they're raising.
Well, that's what happened to me. My and it's out of practicality, it's out of love. They want me to have a life where I don't have to starve, right? But my parents, when I told them I wanted to go into the arts, another field that doesn't typically pay a whole lot. I wanted to be an illustrator or maybe a graphic designer, and they tried to convince me to go into marketing or business, and I was like, I'll be miserable. Never. I don't want to do marketing. Sure, I could sell something, I'm very charismatic, but I don't want a marketing degree. Like, it's a safe thing that'll make you money, but also the quality of life you'd experience, and it's not even a thing you care about. Like, the stuff that I want to do professionally, the degree fields cost a lot is the other part. Like, not only do the Z arts not pay a lot, it costs a fuck ton. You can get a fucking marketing degree or business degree kind of anywhere, graphic design almost anywhere. If you want to do illustration, the schools that start at like the low end are $30,000 a year. Some of them are $60,000 a year. Some of them are more than that, 80, 75, in that range. So you're spending nearly $500,000 to go to school for a degree that will probably pay you nothing. And occult type degrees are kind of the same. I mean, look how many people in the occult sphere, people in this sphere don't make a lot of money, if they're making any money from it at all. It's not a field that's gonna make money. So trying to push people towards academics with it when it's not even a thing that they can make money from is a weird thing, especially when you don't need money. When you don't need to like pay money to learn about it, you can do almost all of it on your own, and any mentorship you need is not going to be in an academic sense.
Well, what
Yeah,
we're
a
also
lot.
seeing,
Go ahead, you talk.
what we're also seeing though happen is like, and I've seen this happen a few times. It comes up every few years. Is that there's this big sense of FOMO, right? Like we push this narrative so much that like you need to be an academic, you need to have a degree X Y Z, and someone will pop up with a PhD that comes from an unaccredited university. They spent 18 months, did a fast track 18 months, $6,000. Later, they have a PhD. They have nothing to show for it. It's not accredited. They can't really do anything with it. It's a fake degree, and they come out of these degree mills, and these are people that we have writing books, and now the degree doesn't make their work any less valuable. They're still writing whatever they were going to write beforehand, but now they've attached this fake PhD to their name, and is that valid, is that not valid? It only really becomes an issue when someone calls it out, and we're seeing that pop up a lot, and it all stems from this issue of people forcing the idea that you have to be an upper level academic to write or talk or speak on these topics.
And then there's also like on that unaccredited degree, there's also all these fake certifications that are out there. Like there's a difference between you took a course that somebody was selling and this is just them saying, yes, you took my course, versus trying to pass it off as like an official thing that the entire community should recognize because you are now certified in whatever. I
You're an
usually see
official
this with
tarot reader.
yeah, tarot certifications. That was the first certification I ever saw, and I immediately knew it was bullshit because I was like there was I think like a practice test or something. It was literally just like flashcards of, do you know what this card means? There's nothing Like there's nothing more complicated than that. It's just, do you know what these cards mean? And you can fucking do that on your own. In fact, you should. This certification, nobody knows about it. Like, if you try to Google it for 2 seconds, see what anybody else has to say, nobody knows who these people are. Nobody knows what this thing is. Why do they have any say over it? It's not like Arthur Waite is personally making this test for you so that you can be certified in the Arthur Waite style of read. Like, that's not, it's just some jank website that's charging you 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks to have a bunk certification that means fucking nothing.
Yeah, I think also, like, people who are new professional readers, it's almost a scam, right? Because
it is a scam. It's not almost, it is a scam.
Because, like, there's some great tarot classes, right? Like, I went to a master class with a person who wrote a book on tarot, Sasha Graham, right? I went to her class. And it was not a certification. I just went to her tarot class, right? And I learned a ton. It was a really great class. It was very informative, and I had a good experience. But I think it's really, like, taking classes is good, right? If you vet the occult teacher, you really like their books, you like what they create on their social media, taking classes can be super helpful. But don't go in with it with the mentality that if you take some specific tarot class, you're going to get board certified like you're taking an LSAT about, like, tarot, right? There's no standard board certification to be a tarot reader. If 15-year-olds on Discord are selling tarot readings, like, there's no license for that, you know? Like, let's be real. You can sell tarot by just being a tarot reader. You know, like, it's not some super, and I respect tarot readers a lot. I read tarot, but it's not like it's some board certification, right? There's no real high up, you know, you don't have to get, like, a driver's license for tarot. I think in some states, if you open a tarot business, like, brick and mortar, you have to get, like, some sort of license.
Yeah,
I don't have
but
a
it's
license, like, well, and it's not my store, but I read professionally at a metaphysical store 1 to 2 or 3 times a month, I want to say. And I don't have any, like, business license that I have to do that.
Yeah, I think in 1 or 2 states, if you open, like, a physical store, you have to get some sort of weird, like, spiritual, but it's like an administrative thing. It's like you pay a fee and you get a little thing you can put in your window.
Yeah, it's like the government allowing you to do this because, like, spiritual services often, I know that our friend Frankie had a lot of issues with this online specifically, not like a brick and mortar place, but, like, online, a lot of places wouldn't host her, like, her store by using them as a payment service because she was doing what is categorized as fortune telling, and they don't allow that, or they severely limit who is allowed to do it, and they just fucking get rid of a bunch of people. So she had trouble for a while trying to get different services to allow her to sell tarot readings even just online.
Yeah. Isn't there, in astrology, don't certain classes have some sort of, like,
yes.
status symbol, though?
Yeah, like, that's why I referenced, like, classes that just give you a certification saying you finished this class. It's not, you are now astrology certified, or at least it shouldn't be. It's, this certifies that you have taken this course, taken this test at the end, and passed that test to a satisfactory level enough to, like, have synthesized the material. The class that I'm taking right now, Chris Brennan's Hellenistic astrology course, has that. You pay for it. It's a lot of fucking information that you can reference for the rest of your life, I'm pretty sure. Comes with a lot of extra, like, files, like free legal translations of Vedius Valen's work, stuff like that. And then at the end, you take this test, it gets graded, and then you get a certification saying you took the class and passed it. It's not saying, now you're a professional astrologer. It's just more of, like, checking your own work for this thing that you paid for.
Here's what I'm going to say about classes, though. Not all classes are scams. And I want to make that super clear in case we haven't. Not all classes are scams. Like, I would say overall, I probably wouldn't pay for a certificate in witchcraft. However, there's certain paths that you can, like, you pay money to, like, be in these schools where you go through traditions. And I mean, I haven't taken it, but I know, like, Christopher Penchek has a school, and that is a very different experience than someone saying, like, I'll certify you to be a professional witch or to be a professional tarot reader or to be whatever. Like, you're paying for a class to learn concepts. You're not paying for a class to get the certificate, and those are two very different intentions.
Yeah, because like that's what Chris Brennan does. And I have his website pulled up right now because I had it up on my screen beforehand. So he has like the Hellenistic astrology class. He has electional astrology. He has a course about being a professional astrologer and like all the sort of businessy parts of it. And then there's like bundles you can put all together, and then he has smaller sections. So if you don't want to take the whole course, you just want to learn about annual perfections or zodiacal releasing. Like he has these things to teach you the concepts, but it's not certifying that you can take this all over the internet and everybody should pay you more. And it, that thing where it's like if you get a bachelor's versus a PhD, you can argue for more money. It's not that way, because if you're a shit reader, you're not going to make any money. That's what it comes down to. This is just learning from a professional who has the experience. I think classes are great. I know that Olivia's taken the Hecate class with Jason Miller. I know that there's lots and lots of brilliant classes out there. Temp, you've run classes, haven't you?
I run classes, yeah.
Yeah, so like classes can be good. Classes can be great. I just think you got to make sure that the person you're learning from is somebody that is not full of shit, because it connects to like our episode. We did an episode about grifters, right? My memory is so shit.
Yeah,
We did an episode on grifters, and we did one on toxic teachers and mentors.
Yeah,
way
so like
back.
Both of those concepts kind of tying in if you've listened to those episodes. If not, you should go do it. But, it ties to that concept of like grifting teachers and looking into their claims and sort of fact-checking them before you take their classes and seeing what their reputation is around the internet. Highly recommend checking their reputation around the internet. If there's a lot of people saying that they seem to be full of shit, maybe avoid those classes. But if they seem to be fairly reputable and a lot of people are enjoying the courses and say that their information is accurate, I really think if you can afford it, go for it. They're optional. You can learn all this on your own. You could fucking learn Hellenistic astrology all on your own for free. You don't have to take these courses. They just help to be able to get, direct learning from professionals.
Yeah, classes are not essential, but they can help. And I personally wouldn't rely on a single class or a single teacher to teach you everything. I think you should always be cross-checking and reading books and talking to people. I think discussion is really useful when learning occultism.
I think you should take I like to take one class a quarter, sometimes two, but I definitely like to take like a minimum of 4 classes a year spread out through various people, because why would we want to stay stuck on our own ways? Like, expand your knowledge, expand your mind pool, or whatever the fuck I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think that getting more information is always good. The worst, you just don't apply something you learned and it's just helpful.
Take a class for the knowledge, not for the piece of paper.
So my final thoughts are that elitism is not good, but you should vet what you're taking in. You don't need a degree in ceremonial magic to do a ritual that's ridiculous. People, like some of the most famous occultists, I'll tell you, they did not have degrees in occultism. Some of them had degrees in things like history, philosophy, religion, but they weren't degreed occultists. That's a pretty new idea. Academia is good, but it is not what represents a good occultist. That's a very classist notion. And don't be a LARPer. Your UPG, you should take seriously and trust. But if your UPG is LARPing, that's a problem. When I say the difference between UPG and LARPing, if your UPG is LARPing. Deep down. I don't need to give signs or warning. We could do an episode on that maybe, but truly in your core, you know who you are.
My final thoughts are I do adore my academia, and I think I always will. I grew up with a mother who was a teacher and very much hammered home like education is important. But I think it's a little silly to limit your definition of academia. Like, taking classes online, if you can afford them, is great. But a lot of the work is ultimately going to come down to you. And I think ultimately it comes down to whether or not you're being an armchair occultist or an armchair witch. You gotta just get your hands dirty, because that's going to be the best way that you can learn. If you're doing astrology, you gotta read charts. If you're doing tarot, you gotta read cards. If you're doing spells, you gotta do spells. Like, you can't just sit there with your bookshelf full of books that you've read and say that's good enough. The actual academia, like at its core, is the doing of it to learn.
My final thoughts are, don't let anyone else's pockets influence your own. Like, let people buy what they're going to buy, stay in your lane, worry about yourself. If someone says you need to do XYZ and they're not financing it, don't give a fuck about it.
So this has been Georgina Rose. You can find me under Dot Darling on YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. I'm on all those platforms. If you want to support the show, Occult on the Side of Salt, to get more episodes, extended shows, video versions, if you want to see our faces and see even more content, you can support us on Patreon, and we really appreciate that. Nike, can you thank our patrons?
Speaking of I even had it pulled up. Look at me, so smart. I got it without forgetting. So thanks to all our patrons that support us. I'm just going to say first names because, there's a lot of you. We've actually got a lot of new patrons. Even just from last week, I think we've gotten even more. So big ol' thanks to all you guys by name. Victoria, Ree, Nico, Melissa, Maria, Liam, Lee, Kat, Doitsu, Ariel. I'm just going to go with Ariel. Melissa, Jay, Evan, Barry, and Amy Momster. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate you. And, you can find me places: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, sometimes Twitter, where I'm chaotic. I'm around. My links are down below, just like the other two. So come see my stuff.
And I'm Temperance Alden. I'm everywhere and nowhere. You can find me at Wildwoman Witchcraft on the internet, pretty much everywhere. My book, Year of the Witch, is available everywhere books are sold.
And this has been
Occultism
with a Side of Salt.
We're
That's
coming for
awful.
your brand Coffee and Cauldrons.
Yeah, bye, witches!
Non-tangible thing grows where you are, it exists where you are. An intentional journey to open up the pathways to connect us to something bigger. It helps everybody in the equation. It has been the magic of the people, and it's passed from person to person. You have to follow through. You have to do the thing. Like happy, safe place. Is that your logic, or was that something you were told? Focus on your craft and your practice. Just ask me why. Why in general? Can you unteach yourself something